I've said this in previous classes, anything that we are talking about here, I prefer that you just take it as a hypothesis. There's a certain beauty to a hypothesis. The beauty of a hypothesis is that it doesn't have to be accepted on the basis of a belief. It is something that you can investigate, you can explore into it, and verify through your own intelligence whether such things exist or not. So that's actually the main difference between what we call a believer and a spiritual seeker. The believer, he just believes. He accepts things on face value without any deeper inquiry, just taking things true for granted. And even though you're accepting certain facts for granted, still, if you're still living with suffering and it has not managed to transform you, of what use are these beliefs? You believe in God, you go to heaven, and let's say you're suffering there. What's the point? Or you believe in no God and you're still suffering. Beliefs are not sufficient for human well-being. That's the difference with a seeker. When we talk about a seeker, we're talking about somebody who's not willing to accept things on the basis of beliefs, assumptions, or theories. He wants to inquire. That's why somebody who's a seeker, he can never be in search of something. He can never be in search of, let's say, God, because God is again an assumption. You've leaped a million miles ahead. Why start off with that assumption that certain things are true or not true? A true seeker, he begins with an empty, clean slate. Not that you don't have certain, because when we talk about a hypothesis, we're talking again about an assumption. Yes, like in science, when they're doing certain experiments, they have a hypothesis, maybe not just one. They'll have maybe 10 hypotheses, which are basically assumptions. But still, they do not cling to those assumptions as true. They have a method to explore, to verify whether such things exist. And even then, it has to be peer-reviewed. Only then will it be accepted as a so-called scientific fact. But again, we're really walking a very thin line here, because even if something is accepted as fact, or it's verified to be true, this is useful, this kind of knowledge is useful, again, for practical things in the world. Not totally useless if you want to come to know of so-called ultimate truth. It's very rare, I'll put it this way, it's very rare for the mind to be struck by insight. But what I would say is even more rare is not creating obstacles out of your own insights. I've told you once a story, maybe some of you have not heard it before. There was once Mara amongst the Buddhists. There's an evil demon of ignorance called Mara. It's just a metaphor. All the collective forces of human ignorance, Mara is metaphorical for that. So one day Mara, he's walking in the forest with his servant, and both of them notice a man in the distance with such a radiating presence. He was in a very deep walking meditation. Suddenly the man, he bent and he picked up something. The servant looked over to Mara. He said, "What happened there? Did you see just what went on?" Mara said, "He's found a small piece of the truth." So then the servant said, "Oh, evil one, you are supposed to be the demon of ignorance. Today somebody has found a piece of the truth." And I can see you're still remaining very calm and centered. Why is this? Then Mara said, oh, don't worry. He's just going to turn it into a belief. That is a very rare quality, for your mind to be capable of knowledge, and at the same time you're not blinded by that knowledge. This is why Socrates, he said, all that I know is that I know nothing. And the oracle in one temple, the temple of Delphi, many people went to see her, and this oracle declared that Socrates is the wisest man in the whole world. So the people went and asked the oracle, we've heard Socrates saying this, that he says that in fact he knows nothing. But you're saying, on the other hand, that he is the wisest man in the whole world. How do you explain this contradiction? The oracle just laughed. She said, you don't understand. It's precisely because he knows that he does not know that I have said he's the wisest man in the whole world. In Zen, this is why they've always talked about maintaining a beginner's mind. Beginner's mind, not that your mind doesn't have knowledge, not that, because you have to keep in mind, these kinds of statements were said by Zen masters who have experienced certain realms of perception which very rarely ever enter into human experience. But yet at the same time they're saying, maintain a beginner's mind. Because in a beginner's mind, you are so receptive to exploring to so many possibilities. The mind of an expert is very rigid, inflexible, blinded by his knowledge. So, what is the true source of human well-being? I would like this to become a very important question for each one of you.